Hello, how you doing out there? My name is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. Happy Father's Day to all. Here on a beautiful Sunday in the Bay Area, June 18th. We're not here to talk about Father's Day. We're here to talk about our very first surprise event. What is surprise? This is our first event that showcases and highlights an artist. I'll be having a discussion with a friend of mine that I know appreciates this artist, band, if you will, quite a bit. So during this event, surprise, we're going to be talking about how this band artist has had an impact on our musical life. In the comments section, feel free to post anything you want related to our conversation. The idea of a surprise is in this discussion, we're going to talk about not only the impact of the band, but also we're going to do some rankings here of albums and songs. And today's first event, we are putting the spotlight on a band called the Lightning Seeds. And I want to bring in a very special guest, gentleman that I have really admire for his work that he's done on his YouTube channel. And he's going to give you more about that information here. So let's bring in Steve Schnee, the CD junkie. Hello, Steve. How you doing?
W, how are you? Thank you. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for wanting to do this. Do you actually know why I reached out to you?
Do I know why you reached out to me? Maybe because I lent you all my Lightning Seed CDs. No, not really.
You did. Well, why don't you give us a little background on who you are and what you do?
Well, my name's Steve Schnee. Normally kind of just known as Schnee now because there's so many Steves out there, but not that many Schnees. Essentially, you know, I've been a music journalist since my days in high school, and you know, I've written for All Music Guide, and I've done liner notes, and I had my own fanzine out in the late '90s called Popsided that I co-edited with my friend Jim, and we actually we probably covered Lightning Seeds because, of course, this was the late '90s, and but basically the last few years, I don't know, 5, 7, 10 years, I've had a YouTube channel where I originally started a show called But Is It Power Pop? And it was just me with a stack of CDs saying, the Money Lemon Drops, great pop, not exactly power pop, you know, power pop adjacent maybe, you know, and I would just go through there. And then it turned into a whole bunch of different shows that now my main thing is CD Junkie. And what CD Junkie is, it will spotlight an artist like Lightning Seeds, which I've done in the past. And I will go through their catalog and talk about each album. And then if I can, feature a medley of songs or whatever. And I also have a couple of radio shows on Mixcloud, radio shows, and I put that in quotes. One is called Return of the Living 80s. And the most popular thing that I've ever done, I think, is something called This Is Ski Lodge, which started as a Mixcloud show, which is sort of 60s soft pop, sunshine pop, going into the early 70s. And, you know, covers everyone from the Association and the Turtles and the Monkees to the Carpenters and things like that. And that turned into a live Tuesday night stream every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, where I've got a great group of people that come together and they just listen to the music and have conversations, you know, in the chat room. And it's a wonderful experience. It turned into merch. I actually have merch. We're almost completely sold out. And it's crazy. It's nuts. I'm very humbled and proud. And I'd love to do this because I have that passion, that joy of music. I don't just want to say, hey, look at me, I own this CD. I want to say, hey, this makes me feel the way that I feel. I want you to feel that joy and that passion too. And that's why I create everything that I do, from a written review to a video review to a radio show. It's trying to connect to people emotionally.
You do such a wonderful job in that. And that's one
Thank
of the
you.
reasons why I have stayed, connected to your work and why I reached out to you. And your sense of appreciation for the history of the artist, and in your reviews, in your YouTube clips, in your shows, you really break it down for the viewer in a way that celebrates their work and honors it in a way that shows that you've done your homework and that
Mhm.
you really respect that part of learning and educating us as fans of music. And yeah, so
Well, the interesting thing about doing what I do is the fact that the only thing that I really use when I'm making my videos is I'm terrible with dates. So I right now I can't tell you what year this album came out, that album came out, no matter how much I love it. But so I'll have a list of the album titles and the year they came out. That's the only thing I reference. Everything else is stuck in here for some godforsaken reason.
I don't know how you keep it all together. By the way, you have a friend here named Gary Wilkerson. He says
Yes.
hello from Austin, Texas.
Yeah, Gary Wilkerson, brother of Danny Wilkerson, who put out the best album of 2018. And
So, hello, Gary. Thank you for tuning in. Much appreciated. So, I want to know, before we actually get into our discussion about the lightning seeds, are you a big fan of the kind of early 80s, synth pop, post punk, anything like that?
absolutely, that's really my sweet spot. Even though Ski Lodge tends to be what people tune in for, the 80s is really basically 78 to 85 is my sweet spot of music. And the reason I got into the Lightning Seeds was because of who Ian Brody was. He had been I first turned on to him when he was a member of, if anybody remembers, the original Mirrors.
Nice.
And they had two albums out. I think, gosh, one was called Heart, Twango, and Raw Beat, and the other one might have been self-titled, or could have been Heartbeat. But that's how I got into him. And then I started seeing his name pop up on albums, production. Echo and the Bunnymen, and oh god, there's so.
OMD.
What was that?
OMD.
Pale Fountains, Colorfield.
Yeah.
He produced the third Icicle Works album, and just a great producer. And should I tell you how I got into the Lightning Seeds, or are we going to hit that soon?
We're going to hit that right now. So,
Okay.
everyone, we are now going to leap into our discussion about this amazing band that had an impact on our lives. So let's retrace our steps, Steve. Tell us, when did it all begin for you, that experience?
It very rarely do I hear anything on the radio first, because I'm one of those nerds who, someone will say, oh yeah, the new Human League album is top 40, and I'll go to the record store to buy the Human League album, and then I'll go, oh, what is this album by this other band I've never heard of called, Flock of Seagulls or whatever, and I'll buy that instead. So I'll take my money, I'll have something else in mind, but I go, I've never heard this band. It looks interesting. But very rarely will I hear something on the radio. There's only been 3 instances where I've heard something on the radio that blew my mind. Number one was Paul Young, Wherever I Lay My Hat, That's My Home, which is an incredible version of a Marvin Gaye song. And then it happened with Icicle Works, and a song actually called Birds Fly, but we know it as Whisper to a Scream. And then the third time was listening to KROQ, and they said, here's a brand new band. It was an import single, and they played a song called Pure. And just you could just see little bits and pieces of my brain because it was melting, and it was just, and I fell in love with it. And I had no idea it was Ian Brody until I went out and bought the single, and right then I just thought, okay, not only is this guy fantastic with what he did with the original Mirrors and the band Care, but he and his production. But boy, he's an amazing artist on his own. Because I think that was the first time I actually heard him sing. Because usually he was the guitar player.
Right, right. So that's going back all the way to 1989.
Yes.
1989. Okay. That's pretty crazy, that narrative that you just shared, because that's very similar to mine. Up here in the Bay Area, we didn't have K-Rock, but we had Live 105, which was very groundbreaking at the time in terms of playing alternative music.
Yeah.
And I can clearly remember when Steve Masters, my favorite DJ at the time, played Pure, and I was gobsmacked. Instant, like, what is this? How can something sound so perfect? It literally, and we're going to get into this discussion about his arrangements and music, his brilliant knack for the melody. But I remember when that out, and I'm glad you used the word import. When that album came out, Cloud Cuckoo Land, I got to Tower Records. You all remember Tower Records?
Mm-hmm.
Up in San Francisco, in Columbus, right outside Little Italy town. And I was looking for two albums, The Sundays, Reading, Writing, Arithmetic, and Cloud Cuckoo Land. And they had them. And they were both like $20-something.
Yeah.
At the time. And so I bought both of them and fell in love instantaneously.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first introduction to the band. And then kind of what you just showed there, did some more going down that wonderful rabbit hole. The thing I want to really, you're probably going to hear me talk about time and time again through this conversation, is not only just his ability, along with other people that support him and play with him, the ability to create that magical hook. And it could be in his vocals, could be in his guitar work. Whatever it is, something within a song can just grab you like that. And make you feel sad, make you feel alive, make you feel whatever it is. So with Ian's work, and can you just talk about that Care album?
Yeah. After the original Mirrors, he had gotten together with, or Ian had gotten together with Paul Simpson from a band called the Wild Swans. And they had formed a duo called Care. And I believe they only released 3 singles during their existence. They never released an album. But then when Lightning Seeds took off, of course, the labels went back into their catalogs and they released that original Mirrors compilation, and they released this Care compilation, which, of course, Paul Simpson sings lead vocals, and they chose a picture with Ian Brody in the foreground, obviously to, capitalize on his success. But this is actually a CD that contains all the release material, and I believe some stuff that they had recorded for the album that was never released. And you get 12-inch mixes and stuff. It's very poppy. I would say, definitely more Lightning Seeds than original Mirrors. It was a sort of almost a precursor to Lightning Seeds. I can imagine Lightning Seeds featuring Paul Simpson if that partnership had moved in, forward into the future.
And there are some real gems on that album. We could have a whole nother discussion on.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's actually get into the impact. I want to know, before we start ranking stuff, what does this band mean to you? How does it tug at the heartstrings? How does it, what do the Lightning Seeds mean to you?
I'm an emotional listener. Everything that I listen to, I feel. And if I obviously feel, or if I don't feel anything, I don't connect with it. Lightning Seeds is a band that works on many levels in terms of being an emotional listener. because you can feel the joy that Ian has in creating the music. You can feel the joy that exudes from these great, wonderful melodies and hooks. Like you said, that could be maybe a harmony of backing vocals, or it could be a guitar hook or a little twinkle of the keyboards. Sometimes that's why I love when you hear like 12-inch mixes of songs, because they take that stuff apart and they put it back together again. And sometimes, if there's not a remix, whatever, sometimes it takes you numerous listens. You could be 5-10 listens in and then go, God, I never noticed that little horn thing at the end of each chorus. And then, you're hooked again. There's so many layers to this music, and it's an emotional, it's an emotional experience because there's so much that comes out of it. Whether it's a sad song, you feel that. If it's a joyful song, you feel that. If it's just, on the surface, some people may just go, they're just a pop band. But no, that's how Ian Broudie is deceptive. He may draw you in just as being, a pop artist, but then he drags you down into this pool of wonderfulness that I still enjoy to this very day.
I want to read the way you described that was perfect. And I want to give you a quote here that Ian said. This is, he says, I think all my songs are about the fear of change. And they're all about making sure you love this moment, this bit, because it might not happen again.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that quote?
It makes perfect sense. As everyone knows, emotions and life and love and joy and happiness, passion, that stuff can be fleeting, and us being humans, sometimes this stuff doesn't crack the skulls or crack the heart of some people. And other people, I think, they'll just push it off, but other people will accept it and know that this is a moment that I will cherish right now. But, and I may not feel this way about other music or other things, but I will carry this into the future. And I will, a lot of our emotions are just basically just memories that we just unwrap like Christmas morning. And that's what his music is, in my opinion, really all about.
I'm going to ask you a tough question here.
Uh-oh. I got to go. No.
What have you learned about yourself or the way that you listen to music in having the lightning seeds part of your musical experience? What have you learned?
That's probably tough because you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think it's really about listening to things, like I alluded to a little while ago, about listening to things below the surface.
Yeah.
And uncovering things, because you can listen to a Lightning Seeds album now and realize, God, I love this a lot more than I thought I did. Or it's not really that. It just sounds better with each listen. And it opens, in a way, it opens you up to these wonderful opportunities of accepting things you didn't care for before, like maybe a certain song. And it really just getting it hooks in you or in me, and maybe even shining a light, because when you listen to this music, you want to share it and you want to connect with people.
Yes.
And so that probably didn't answer that question, but it allowed me to talk, and I like talking about the Lightning Seeds.
And I want to piggyback off that. Sometimes within the music, there are moments where it's that melody, it's the hook that we've talked about. there's a lot for me. It's that romantic feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That could be embracing someone that you dearly love. It could be embracing that moment. You're
Mm-hmm.
watching a beautiful sunset. You're eating this delicious food. It bursts with the colors of life, right? And the lyrics, his lyrics, I absolutely appreciate because he does it in a very clever way at times. And one of my favorite lines is this from a song. all I all I want. I've always loved this line.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all I want to do is make you listen from now on. Cardboard men are strong, but paper can be torn.
Mm-hmm.
You better listen from now. I've always loved that. Beautiful metaphor. So yeah, let's not forget the power of his lyrics.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a dive into some of the rankings of the album.
Okay.
And should we start with numero 7?
Numero 7. We are going to start. Okay, now this is. I'm not comparing Lightning Seeds to the Beatles, but it's just like ranking your favorite Beatles album. It's like, do you really love Revolver over Rubber Soul or over Abbey Road? Maybe today you do, but they're all great albums, and that's what I'm going to say about and I'll tell you why. Number 7 is Four Winds. This was like the first album that had, oh gosh darn it, let me find my notes here because I'm terrible. As I told you earlier, I'm absolutely terrible with release dates. This album actually came out in 2009, and this seems to me to be he had put out a solo album a few years before this, and this seems to be like about halfway through a new solo album. His label said, come on, Ian, put it out as the Lightning Seeds. So then like the last, second half of the album he recorded as the Lightning Seeds. So song wise, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, the title track is great. Ghosts, Don't Walk On By, great songs. But the problem is it sounds half like an Ian Broudie solo album, which is great, and half like a Lightning Seeds album. And that's why it's number 7 on my list. It's still wonderful songs. He's a wonderful songwriter no matter what genre he's writing in. His solo stuff is more acoustic based, but really, really wonderful stuff.
I love the album cover.
Yes.
It's wonderful. And that came out in 2009.
Yes.
So with that album, I love the first song, Four Winds.
Mm-hmm.
Really builds and swells. Let's go to your number 6.
My number 6. Okay. Well, first off, I did want to show you Ian Broudie did have a solo album that came out called Tales Told. I did want to show you that. I don't want to forget it. My number 6, again, only because we've had less than a year to digest it. It's called See You in the Stars. And it's a wonderful, absolutely wonderful album. But we've had a few decades to ingest everything else. Yeah. And we've only had a year to ingest this. So that's why it's my number 6. It continues in the vein of the Lightning Seed stuff off of Four Winds. But, like Losing You is a great track. Emily Smiles, I think that was a single. Green Eyes is great. Sunshine, Walk Another Mile, still a very, very strong album. But, as I said, number 6, because I haven't had as much time to hear it and to ingest it as the others.
Interesting that you picked that as number 6, because my number 6 was Tilt.
Oh,
yes. And again, it's like you were making the analogy of the Beatles. Mm-hmm. So much great body of work here to sift through, and just a great, and it was difficult at times. So here's how just to give people an idea how I rank these albums. I listened to the tracks. It was great revisiting some of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I ranked each song 1 through 5, 5 being the highest. And then I would add them up and then do the average.
Mm-hmm.
whatever the average score was. And then I started ranking them. So with Tilt, came out in 1999. I picked that as my number 6. It's a good album, absolutely. I love it. To me, it has a flavor of Pet Shop Boys to it,
Mm-hmm.
and a little bit of that New Order experimentation going on with the disco and the electronica spirit. There's a song here, "Sweet Soul Sensation,"
Yeah.
track number 2. Great number 2 track. Sometimes I feel like people talk about first tracks, last tracks of an album, but I think a number 2 should get some more love. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. It has that dubby bounce to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then City Bright Stars, I know, is a popular one. However, my favorite track from that album is track number 7, and that is Get It Right. I love
co-written with Terry Hall.
Yes, one of his co-pilots, right?
Yes.
Love the tempo on that, but to me, I know I don't think he thinks of himself as a great vocalist, but I think the vocals on that song fabulous. So I'm picking that 1999 Tilt as my number 6.
He is a great vocalist, and one thing I noticed about this ranking, going through and picking the albums and stuff, is his best collaborator was Terry Hall, and we all know that Terry Hall passed away. Terry Hall from the Specials, the Colorfield, Fun Boy 3, Terry Blair and Anushka, and then back to the Specials again. Wonderful artist, and plus Ian worked on Terry's solo albums with him, and it just seems like almost every one of my favorite Ian Brody tracks or Lightning Seas tracks was co-written by Terry Hall. But I mean, still, he had a lot of other great co-songwriters like Ian McNabb, Peter Coyle from the Lotus Eaters, and Alison Moyet. He co-wrote a song. But my number 5 is Tilt. Yeah, and Life's Too Short's a great song. If Only, like you said, Get It Right. Just Tales of the Riverbank. This is, I think, it's a absolutely wonderful album. I think it was recorded a couple years after it was recorded like 3 years after the previous album, and I think sort of the things were winding down. I mean that was our last album for 14 years or something like that, or 10 years.
Crazy. So you are known as the CD junkie.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask you this question before we can go back into this. Do you have any vinyl?
Not really, no. I've not taken that dip back. I want to walk into a store, and for, let's say, suggested retail price, I see a 3 CD expanded Tears for Fears the Hurting, or 2 CD whatever, and it's $19.99. Oh, I'm going to pick that up, right? But if I decide, well, gosh, I'm going to buy the 9-track LP, that's almost double the price. So do I want to pay $20 for 30 tracks, or do I want to pay $30 for 9 tracks? I'm going to stick with CDs. Plus, my hearing has always been off. I miss some frequencies that you can hear easily. Sometimes I can't hear birds chirping. In fact, a lot of times there's a lot of frequencies I can't hear. So CDs are going to be fine with me. I don't feel that warmth that other people feel.
Just had to ask because
yeah.
Okay, so that was your number 5.
Yeah.
My number 5 is Dizzy Heights. Dizzy Heights. And again, so you alluded to the Beatles. I have no idea. I was not in his mind during that time. The album came out in 1996. I was in college at the time, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And when I first heard the album, I was thinking, boy, this has Beatles written all over it and Beach Boys.
Mm-hmm.
And it just had that spirit. It had that energy. It had some of that punch. And it actually has one of my favorite Lightning Seed song of all time, and that is Fishes on the Line.
Mm-hmm.
That guitar work towards the end, and I think that's a great closer. And of course, well known for Sugar Coated Iceberg, beautiful horns. The album sounds very lush, very full sounding to me.
Yeah.
So I'm picking that number 5. And remember, that was riding off the coattails of the huge success of Jollification. So I wonder, like, okay, how similar did he want to make that album, and how different from the
Right,
previous one?
right, right.
Yeah.
By the way, we just got a response from a possible guest, and they the link is not working for them, so they're downloading Chrome.
Okay,
So
great. Thank you for letting us know, this mystery guest. Okay, so that was my number 5. Let's go to number 4.
okay, I'm just responding to him.
Okay.
Number 4, I guess you and I are on the same wavelength, because my number 4 is Dizzy Heights.
Okay. Love
And
that.
yeah, it's got so, in my opinion, I look at this, I'm surprised, because I think really the only big track on this album was his cover version of, the Turtles track, or the song the Turtles are most known for, called "You Showed Me." But there was like Sugar Coated Iceberg. One of my favorite tracks would be like "What If,"
Mhm.
and "Imaginary Friends," "You Bet Your Life."
Yep.
It's a solid album. I do agree with you that again, it's really hard to say that he's never released a bad record at all. And but Dizzy Heights had to fall somewhere, so it fell in my number 4.
You talked about when you listen to the Lightning Seeds,
Mm-hmm.
you may not hear these little accents that they incorporate. And I love this album because when I listen on headphones and I was
Mm-hmm.
picking up things, I'm like, oh, I didn't notice that before.
Yeah.
Um, so I just kind of put that in my notes, and I love the line, "Remember all my Mersey skies." I love that, and yeah, and there are some songs here that I've always, if I ever had the chance to speak with Ian, how much was his work appreciation? Like, what does he feel about Brian Wilson?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything, any knowledge of
No,
that?
no,
Okay.
I have no inclination, but I do know that like on Dizzy Heights, that's "You Bet Your Life" is very Beach Boys. It reminded me of Beach Boys in terms of the arrangements, like the bass and all that stuff. But it also reminded me of like "Don't Sleep in the Subway" by Petula Clark, which was basically inspired by the Beach Boys. So that whole Brian Wilson thing, I'm sure he's a fan, because you can hear bits and pieces
Yeah.
of Brian throughout his catalog.
All right, let's go to the next one. So that was your number
That was my
4.
4. Yeah.
My number 4, sitting right here.
Yep.
Sense. All right. This album is pretty damn amazing. Came out in 1992. I was a senior in high school, and I remember when it came out. Okay, so Life of Riley had been playing on the radio here
Mm-hmm.
all over. And I remember when the album came out. At my high school, there was a parking lot, very small parking lot that people just hung out in. It was outside the actual main parking lot. And when I got the album, I ditched school the afternoon. I went
Mm-hmm.
over this parking space, put the CD in, and just kind of lied back and took all those sounds in.
Mm-hmm.
And you kick off that album with Sense, holy
Yeah.
smokes. I mean, the pogo feel to it. It's like, okay, get me in that rocket ship. I'm ready to take off with you.
Yeah.
It's, again, to me, it does have the little bit of that Pet Shop Boys flair to it. As I love it. It's got the harmonica going on. I was feeling that Manchester scene is right in that period, maybe a little bit after. But you go from Sense, then you knock it out of the park with one of your most anthemic songs, Life of Riley.
Yep.
Then you go into Blowing Bubbles, Where Flowers Fade. And then it just kind of goes down back, tempo goes down a bit. And then it has another one of my favorite Lightning Seeds tracks, which I feel people don't talk about, is Maroon.
Yeah.
Maroon. Love that song. And then Happy has that kind of Hall & Oates appeal to it. But yeah, that is definitely my number 4 album. That was, yeah. And of course, big admirer of that album cover.
Yes.
Like so many. All right. So what is
my number 3?
Yeah.
Side by side again. Sense is my number 3. This, of course, the song Sense. Just the other day I watched the video to Sense, and Terry Hall is actually in the video. I don't know if anybody, and I think Terry Hall did that on his first solo album as well. But yeah, Sense is great. Life of Riley was the song I think that might have been the first single. I could be wrong. Blowing Bubbles is great. Happy, which was co-written by Ian McNabb from the Icicle Works and solo.
Yes.
That's another great track. Small Slice of Heaven, which is another song co-written with Terry Hall. Just wonderful. And I think this doesn't hurt it for me, but sometimes when you listen to any album from a certain period, this is very early 1990s sounding, production wise, and the sound of the instruments and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't detract from the fact that the songs are absolutely killer. Ian Brody, I think that he burps melodies, just burps great hooks.
He does, and I love that imagery. And someone else that's burps melodies and is very attuned to what you just talked about. We have a very special guest here. Goes by the name of Boots. Can we bring Boots in, Mr. Schnee?
Bring Boots on.
All right. Boots, can you hear
us?
Hello,
America.
Ian, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ian McNabb. Ian McNabb is the only artist in this universe that can get away with writing a song called I'm a Genius, and you believe every word of it.
How you doing, guys?
Good. Hello, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for being part of this surprise event number 1. As you know, we were talking about the Lightning Seeds. My name is W. We're here with Steve Schnee, CD Junkie, and now we have a very, very special guest, Ian McNabb. Would you share mind telling us your experience, any Lightning Seeds experience working with Ian, any of other musicians?
Yeah, well, I was. How long have you got, by the way?
Take your time, my friend.
I was very aware of Ian's work, coming from Liverpool. He was well, still is a local legend, and not just a local legend, a global legend. And I was first aware of his work as a guitar player in a band called Big in Japan, which was one of the first kind of punk new wave acts that we had here in Liverpool, and I think about 1978. It might have even been 1977. And that band consisted of Ian Brody, Jane Casey, Holly Johnson, Bill Drummond, Budgie, and I think Paul Rutherford from Frankie Goes to Hollywood. I'm not quite sure about that. Please, the memory is going, but I intend to try and do that for you. And then Ian became a producer. I think the first thing he did was he remixed a couple of tracks from Echo and the Bunnymen's first album, and he recorded and produced Rescue, which I believe was their second single, first on Warner's Corova. And, you know, he was omnipresent on the scene. He was a cool guy, you know, and he was one of those guys that you're like, how'd you get to be as cool as that, you know? Because I was just a little bit younger than all those guys. And I was in cabaret bands. You know, we were doing working men's clubs around the north of England, playing cover songs of the day, you know, doing covers basically. Not cool. Well, it was cool to me at the time, but it wasn't cool.
Yeah.
And then, you know, we got to know each other, and you know, I watched his career with great interest. He had a band called Care, which I'm sure you've discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And then after, I think it was our second album, we bumped into each other in a drinking establishment in town, and we got talking more than we'd ever done before. And he agreed to have a listen to some of my new songs, and maybe have a crack at working together, see how we got on, you know, get in a rehearsal room and just see what happens if we get on, you know, because we got on as people, but you know, that doesn't mean you're going to get on working together. That's a completely different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did, and he ended up producing a song called Understanding Jane, a song called Evangeline, a song called Who Do You Want For Your Love, and then he did the whole of the Icicle Works' third album, If You Want to Defeat Your Enemy, Sing His Song. So we spent a lot of time together, you know. I call Ian the pop detective, because he's like a musical Columbo, you know. Yeah. He'll find the hit, you know. Excuse me, I just got one more idea for a chorus. I learned so much from him. I mean, just listening to records with Ian Brody was a great learning thing, you know. Because you'd go around to his house and he'd have a cup of tea and a bite to eat, and then he'd just start putting videos on, and he'd just sit there with his mouth open in awe. You know, you'd go round at like 11:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, and he'd be listening to Jacques Brel, you know. It was great. And then, of course, that inspires you to, you know, I love that. Hang on a sec, I've just got a chair problem. I love that when somebody is that enthusiastic, and it makes you, you know, to get you to listen to things that you wouldn't normally listen to. Mm-hmm. And Ian did all of that with me. It was very much like a Yoda thing with Ian.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought he brought a lot out. He like Ian McNabb. You know, everybody knows I'm a big fan of Ian. And on if you want to defeat the enemy, you know, Ian or Boots writes these incredible melodies, and sometimes it could be, you know, on the first album, these great songs, you know, you might be paying attention more to Chris Sherrick's drumming or Chris Leahy's bass, whatever, to forget these melodies. But I think on that third album, he lifted the melodies up. And on If You Want to Defeat the Enemy, that was an album that I remember just blowing me away, because it's like, here were the songs. This is, you know, the Icicle Works were always a great band, but that's the album that really, in my opinion, showcased the songs. I'm just surprised the album never became as huge as it should have been. Just incredible piece of work.
I thought it was huge.
Well, not here in America.
Well, you know, I'm being slightly facetious. Sorry, yeah. You know, I don't judge it that way. I mean, I think if you kind of wait for music to be validated by commercial success and critics giving you 5-star reviews, I think you're kind of on a hide into nothing there. I mean, my direct kind of link to the muse has always been, I just want to make records that I'm really happy with, and to put them out. And I think the time that a record is really judged isn't when it comes out and when you're spending a fortune, you know, getting it adverts and taking out full page ads in trade magazines so that you get 5-star reviews, or slipping DJs little gifts under the counter so they'll put you on the playlist. I don't really think that's where it's at. I think time is what decides it. And I just think it's so great. I don't want to take this away from Ian Brody, because this is the Ian Brody moment, not mine. But I think it's great that. But I'll talk about me for a minute.
Yes, please do.
I think it's. I mean, I'm a big fan of streaming, not in terms of that it's going to make me be able to, put an extension on my house. I don't think it's about money, and it certainly isn't going to allow me to put an extension on my house. Far from it. You get paid diddly squat for streaming, but what you do get is the chance for people to hear your music that wouldn't even think about buying anything. I've discovered so many artists through Spotify and and the other streaming platforms that are available. And I love that thing that they have on Spotify where you scroll down to the bottom and it goes, people also liked. I was listening to Paul Westerberg the other day. I'm a big Paul Westerberg fan. And, I was, what's this? And I went down and said, people also like, and I think there was a band called Crash Bang, something like that.
Right.
Anyway, they're very much in the same idiom and high level of melodic songwriting and nice jangly guitars and great production, concise, great pop / rock music. And that's opened up another avenue for me. So now I'm into that. And if I like something streaming, I'll do a YouTube thing, make sure that the lead singer doesn't look like a dick.
Now, Ian, was that song? Was that group Batch and Pop?
That's the one.
Yeah, because it's Tommy Stinson from The Replacements.
Right. Okay. There we go. Yeah. Tommy Stinson. So there's the connection. And of course, Tommy was in The Replacements, and then he went on to play bass with Guns N' Roses.
Yep.
So there we go. And I didn't know that. Okay. Anyway, so I go down that road, and then if you go to their page, then you go to another thing, and then before you know it, it's time to go to bed. And it's like, what happened? I was going to do so much today, and I absolutely love that. So just going back briefly to my point, I think that certainly since Whisper to a Scream, Birds Fly, as you call it over there, was in Stranger Things. I mean, the listening numbers on the Icicle Works have gone through the roof, and hopefully some people will get to hear some of the other music. Maybe some of them will make the connection and listen to my stuff. So I'm cool with all of that. But Defeat Your Enemy, the album that Ian did with us, it was the album that had so many near misses with what you're talking to regarding success in the UK and Europe as well. It's like all those singles where they got played on the radio loads and they just nearly bust into the 40, but not quite. And thank God they didn't. Because I honestly think that if we would have become as big as, I don't know, one of those bands that wasn't massive but did pretty well, say a band like Big Country or, I don't know, something like that. I'm trying to think. I'm remembered in America, or not remembered, but known for one song. And that's fine by me because it's better than no songs. And it means that I don't get asked to do all of those fucking nostalgia festivals, where they wheel you on and you play your 4 hits. And it's, let's pretend it's 1983 again. I don't have to get asked to do that because I've only got one.
Yeah.
And I know that if I did have those songs and they paid me enough money, I'd do it. And then all of a sudden you backed into a corner whereby that's what you do. You're known for this. I mean, with all due respect to the great Nick Kershaw, I think he's a wonderful talent. And he was a big, big success. He does all that stuff. and his work is laid out as he goes on, and everybody wants to hear those couple of songs.
Mhm.
Whatever.
Mhm.
Fantastic. I don't get asked to do those things, so I just stay within my little confines, and I can play and do anything I want, you know. So that's kind of that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
And all the music's still there. Another funny thing is those songs, when I play them live, they get treated like they were hits, and that's pretty cool, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Ian. You you worked on Cloud Cuckoo Land.
Yeah.
I know
Well,
Henry Priest.
Land, I did. That was. I think was that the second Light
No,
and
that's the
Seeds
first
album? First one.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was we were working on icicle work stuff, and Ian used to use an engineer, and we used to use an engineer at a place called Amazon Studios just outside Liverpool, called Pete Coleman. And Ian was like, "Oh, you know, Ian was conscious of his voice, which I didn't think he had any need to be at all, you know. But I think he was a bit, you know, because he sometimes worked with people like Ian McCulloch and me, who were very sort of, you know, Gilbert O'Sullivan, you know, whoa, you know, and he didn't do that, although he was very good at producing those kind of singers. And his voice is obviously very different, and I'm not taking any credit for it because he knows exactly what he's doing. But me and Pete both got on, no, come on, man. And so Ian asked me if I'd produce his demos. I mean, produce the vocal session. And by that, he meant have a listen through to me singing it and make any comments you want. And, you know, and that's what we did. And he did about 3 tunes. I think one was called War Goes On. There was another one. Oh gosh, honestly, it was so long ago, I'm not sure of the titles. But they were great songs, you know, they're very embryonic Lightning Seeds things, great chords, great production, very catchy, and Ian singing. And once he got used to that, then he was off. And so Cloud Cuckoo Land, I think he asked me to do, I don't know if I did backing vocals on that one, but he asked me to write some. Did I? Okay. He asked me to write some lyrics for a backing track he'd done. And I think on that album, it might have been a song called Happy.
Yeah.
I think so, which was, it was kind of a riff on a track called Tramp. So I did that. And on Jollification, which was the breakthrough record he did, I wrote the lyrics for a song called Feeling Lazy. And I did backing vocals on 1 or 2 tracks on that album. Yeah.
And also on Sense too. You
did I?
Gosh. Yeah. On Sense you do no, actually Happy was on Sense, and then yeah, Happy was on Sense, and then Feeling Lazy you did in fact that was almost like nearly a duet, you know, because your voice was out in front during some of the parts, actually, you know, backing vocals, but you can very clearly hear you.
Well, I remember doing Put Your Foot Down and Drive. I think that's me. And Terry Hall did The Taste of Love. He did that. I don't know because Ian, you know, had me sing quite a lot of stuff. In fact, I think I remember the session, and he played me maybe 4 or 5 tunes, and said, can you sing this? And I can't remember if Terry was already on it and then I added to it, or if I sang it and then Terry added to it, or if it was just Terry and not me, or if there was one where it was just me and not Terry. I can't remember. I haven't got the CDs in front of me to jog me memory. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff, you know. And also when Ian was going around, because I don't think he had a full-time band at this point. So when he'd have to go and do promo at radio stations and whatnot, I'd do a couple of those with him as well. I'd just turn up with an acoustic guitar and, do a bit of backing vocals, a bit of strumming. And it was a lot of fun and it was exciting. And I mean, the first record that came out was a song called Pure.
Yes.
Which is such a classic, I didn't have anything to do with that. I just heard it and thought, wow. And that became a hit. And then it started up, and it was great to see. And the other thing that I love about Ian is, as cool as he is, and as cool as he was perceived, he was never afraid of going, pop music, music, the Big Strawberry, and it's pop and jollification, and it was all up and it was happy, and those records make you feel good, because he he's produced The Fall, for Christ's sake, and the Bunnymen, and lots of kind of things like that.
Yeah,
I'm just going to get my wire to plug my computer in because I was in such a hurry there to connect with you. So if you just punch me out for a second, I'll come back when I plug this back in. How's that?
Okay.
So, hello everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. I'm here with the CD junkie Steve Schnee and legendary frontman from the band Solars 2, Ian McNabb, has joined us in this conversation.
Yes, the Icicle Works. We're talking about the Lightning Seeds. So, Ian worked with, or Ian McNabb, or Boots worked with Ian Brody. Back in the day, he just explained that. And okay, he's plugging it in now. I think he's back on there. But yeah, I think that both Ian McNabb and Ian. I always thought that Ian McNabb, Ian Brody, and Ian McCulloch should have formed a band called the Three-Ins.
So, Ian, if you wouldn't mind, can you mute? We're getting feedback.
Or just lower your volume a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
How's that?
Testing 1, 2. That's better.
Hello.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. So what is up with Ian Liverpool, as Steve alluded to? What you, Ian Brody, Ian McCulloch? Do you ever think about that?
There's something about Liverpool.
I don't know. It's funny, because my first name's Robert, but I've always been called Ian, and I was never able, in all my years with my parents, was never able to get a sensible answer as to why they called me Ian, because my name's Robert Ian McNabb, but I always got called Ian. And neither of them are here now, so I definitely, that's it. It's shrouded in mystery forever now. But Ian, it was, and when I was at school and growing up in Liverpool in the 60s and 70s, I didn't know anybody called Ian, and it was kind of skittered out a bit because it, probably, it's a bit sort of, I don't know, it wasn't a rock and roll name is what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? It was a bit sort of fey, something you might call, an author of a book about trout fishing. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, it wasn't a rock and roll name. It was before Ian Curtis, Yeah. Oh, actually, there was Ian Hunter, so shame on me for saying that. But I wasn't particularly aware of any musicians when I was being skittered at from a name. And then when all the new wave stuff started, everybody was called Ian. And there was Ian McCulloch, Ian Brody. There's a guy in Liverpool, a good friend of ours called Ian Prose, and one of Echo and the Bunnymen's managers called Peasy because his name's Ian. Skinny, my guitar tech, his name is Ian McFarlane, so we call him Skinny. So everybody has to have nicknames. That's why I've got the Boots, because if you one day we were in Amazon Studios, and I don't know how many of us were there, but the phone went, and it was somebody ringing up for Ian and Skinny, who was a tape op at the time, who then became my guitar tech. His name's Ian as well. So somebody rang up and went, "Hey, can I speak to Ian?" And he went, "Which one?" And I said, Ian Mack. And he said, "Which Ian Mack?" Both me and McCulloch were there. And it was Ian Brody that he was looking for, and he was there too. So, if you walk into like a music related situation in Liverpool and shout Ian, half the room will turn around and look at you. So I'm not really sure. I guess it became popular because I was born in 1960. Max about 18 months older than me, Ian about the same. So obviously, around about 1958. Up to 60, up to 64, Ian was a popular name. I'm trying to think, maybe there was a very popular actor or somebody was famous who was called Ian in that time.
Yeah, amazing.
It is funny though.
I have one more question, and then I'd love for you to share with us what you're doing right now, just in case people aren't aware of your solo work, any tours, any albums, anything you want to share. But here's a question for you. I've never been to Liverpool. I'm going to get there one day because of what we're talking about, the spirit of the music here. What is in the Liverpool water that has created so many great artists? What the hell is going on over there?
Well, W, as you can probably imagine, it's not the first time that I've been asked that question.
I know.
In fact, we got asked that question on American Bandstand by Dick Clark. Whoa, name drop, ding! and the answer is still a mystery to me, but I will say this. What is it? Being, to paraphrase somebody else, being born in Liverpool brings with it certain responsibilities. I was not a fan of music or interested in it until I was about 12. I was previously interested in, football, soccer, as you guys call it. I was very interested in the American space program because this was what was going on, and I was into all that stuff. I wasn't really into music because it just seemed a little trite, and I only ever really got to hear stuff like, I don't know, the real big hits that were kind of not really my thing at the time. And then I got into it because of Mark Bolan, because I saw him on telly when I was 11. And then, of course, eventually you come to the Beatles. And then you just start unraveling. And it was a great time because the Beatles had broken up. I mean, the first Beatles record I bought was Let It Be. Imagine how that fucked with my brain,
Yeah.
So I started backwards, and then throughout the 70s, there was nothing about Liverpool. It was all in the past. It was all about Merseybeat. And then with the punk and new wave explosion, we got this incredible, it was like the most fantastic downpour after a terrible flood, you just couldn't move the music, and you could try and walk between the raindrops, but it'd still get you, and it was just bands, and you were just like, wow, this is, and you thought, and you know what? You'd see them on TV and hear them on the radio, and you think you've got a chance here. So they did Up Your Game. I remember hearing Pictures on My Wall by Echo and the Bunnymen, and I remember hearing Bouncing Babies by the Teardrop Explodes, and Electricity by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. And, I'm going, wow, you don't have to be able to play guitar like Jeff Beck to be cool, And that's what that was all about. So everybody was just trying. And basically, the other thing was that unless you were into music, then you had to be into football, because otherwise you didn't have any mates. So if you were into music, you'd go to shows and everybody else was into it. And not that you had to force yourself to be into it, you were into it. And it was just everywhere you went. McCartney always says this thing about, in Liverpool, everybody had to have a song, and everyone, like, you had to sit there at the piano and stuff, and I'd be there. And that, that's true to a certain extent, but that was always at Christmas or summer holidays or something, you didn't go to, I'm going to do this as a job. But when you were doing this with all these other bands and then, somebody would come in and go, hey, we just got a record deal with Warner's, and you'd be like, what? You were on benefits last week. How the hell does this even happen? I must write a better song. And that's when I went, we are the children. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Even if it didn't answer any question in the world, it was still an amazing answer.
You're a great storyteller, by the way, as well as your musicians.
So I do like talking about the form,
Tell us, before we get back into the ranking of the albums, and you're obviously more welcome to stay on if you like, but tell us what you're doing now, any solo work, any upcoming tours, anything you want to share.
I'm still doing exactly the same as I've always done. I've just put a new record into the factory there, which is called New Brighton Rock, and that's got 10 new tracks on it and a cover version of
I love the cover
Foreigners.
version.
I Want to Know What Love Is. And I've taken a little break now because I've been doing shows for a year, pretty much every weekend. I only play at weekends, which is cool because I only play in the UK, and it's a nice easy pace at my advancing years. I don't like traveling. I don't like getting on airplanes. I don't like sitting on tour buses. So this works out well for me. So we've got a little break, and then I'm just putting this album out, which hopefully will be out in August. Then more UK shows towards the end of the year. And my next project, the one that I've just stopped working on to have a chat with you lovely people, is an album called Fleetwood McNab, which is an album of my interpretations of songs throughout the whole Fleetwood Mac era, because I find them a really fascinating band in terms of the fact that I like stuff from every era of Fleetwood Mac. And unlike other bands that have changed members, where usually the constant is always the songwriter, the front person or the front persons, the only constant in this band is the rhythm section, and they get new people in to go up front and change the sound. And they did do from the time Peter Green left until Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks showed up. And of course, they stuck with that until they couldn't. And then they used other people. And that was pretty interesting too. So that's my next project. And finishing off part 2 of my autobiography, part 2 memoir. So, yeah, I'm busy. And, you won't know, W, but I was a full-time carer for my mother, who sadly passed away just over a year ago. So I've got a tremendous amount of time suddenly to fill, which is what I'm doing. I'm not sitting around waiting for Days of Our Lives or reruns of Dallas. I'm getting on.
And Ian, you also have plenty of love and support from all of us out here.
Yeah, no, and I'd really appreciate that. I know the internet can be a double-edged sword, but it works great for me.
You're a little.
You know what? You can still kind of have so much social interaction with people. I've discovered this through lockdown. Did so many of these interviews and stuff, and not just interviews, but talking to people on Zoom was something that I would have never have considered before the pandemic. And it's really cool just to say hi, and then you can go and do something else, So, but it's all good. Thank you very much for asking, and thanks for letting me be a part of this. And love you, Mr. Brody. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, thank you, Ian, for being our very special guest here. Much appreciated, and much success to you. And yes, your mom. I know you have shared quite a bit about your mom on your posts over the past year, and it's very touching comments and sad and funny and just full of life.
Well, I mean, it's been cathartic for me because it's helped me a great deal.
Yeah.
And the response that I've had by being, I'm pretty direct. I tell it like it is. I tend to shoot first and ask questions later, which has caused me problems. So there we go.
Facebook.
I think that I've had a lot of I'm talking a lot of really nice personal messages from people who've gone through. We all go through grief. We all go through illness. We all go through terrible things. And the one thing that is constant and assured is that it just feels a little easier if you know that you're not going through it alone. Yeah. And a lot of people have reached out to me and thanked me for my being candid about my feelings and, not being I've got a tough exterior, but I'm just a soft center. And sharing the emotions, I think, really helps other people. I hope it does. I think it has done. So that's been really nice.
Absolutely. And for anybody out there, if you haven't heard, Ian McNabb's last 20 years of his, he's been a cottage industry unto himself and has released, in many people, not just my opinion, but his best material. I mean, he's still, there's no one that I can think of in the game right now that 40 years after the first time I heard him, yep, there you go. 40 years after the first time I heard him, that's Abbey Road. Yeah, you see, great album titles too. You can buy or you can check out Ian's music and
we have a little like we have on the shopping channel,
Yeah, IanMcNabb.com.
Hey, listen, thanks a lot. It's not about me. This is about Ian.
No, but you know what? You're a special guest, so I wanted to make sure that people are going to say, "Hey, this guy's really cool. Let's go check out his music." If they're not familiar with you, I feel bad if they're not familiar with you, but they will be now.
Yeah. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
Okay, you guys have a great whatever. What the hell are you guys doing all day? Go and do the garden, for Christ's sake. When are you guys gonna get jobs?
Maybe we'll get you on for our next conversation about Brittany.
I'm out of here. Goodbye.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. All righty, that was Ian McNabb.
Ian McNabb, the legend. What an artist he is. I always let him know. I always let him know that he's still just an amazing artist. But let's get back into the ranking.
Let's do so.
It's like you have to breathe a little bit after, take a little break after dealing with McNabb, because it's like, wow, this is really that guy who sang this song and that song and that song and that song.
So many.
Yeah,
so many.
He's a great guy and a great artist.
Let's go to number 3.
Number 3, I think I did my number 3.
Okay.
Which was Sense.
Yes, you did. Okay. My number 3, this might surprise you.
It's the Second Flock of Seagulls album. Oh, okay.
It is Cloud Cuckoo Land, and this was pretty difficult. I mean, it's what an incredible first album, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people are very familiar with it. 1989, high school. We talked about the radio, the hit, when Pure came out. But when you start an album, kick it off with All I Want, something like that, and those amazing lyrics I alluded to earlier, song after song, track after track, it doesn't miss a beat. And I love the variety here.
Mm-hmm.
I love just going back to that time period in my mind. some of the most amazing choruses ever put out there. There's a song called Joy,
Oh.
and it has that Frasier chorus sound, which I know you and I both really appreciate that band. And of course, that's the epic song, The Price. So yeah, I put that as my number 3. That was a tough one. There we go, right there. Nice.
This remix I prefer over the album version.
Why?
It just sounds, it's a whole different feel.
Yeah.
It's more of an emotional feel to me.
Yeah. Nice. I'm glad you had that. That's awesome. All right, let's do number 2.
Number 2. And number 2 ain't the S word. Number 2 is my number 1 and 2 were basically tied. And this morning I finally chose that number 2 was Jollification.
Nice. All right.
What an incredible album filled with amazing songs. Lucky You, I think, is right up there with Pure as one of his greatest instantly lovable pop songs. But, you know, Change is great. And it's super, super amazing. You've also got, Alison Moyet's on here. Of course, Ian McNabb, who we just spoke with. Feeling Lazy is on this album that we talked about. But My Best Day and Punch and Judy and Telling Tales and Why is another. This is a superb, absolutely superb album. And the saddest thing about this album is if you walk into any CD store right now and go to their like $1.99 bins or whatever, or dollar bins, this is there. And it's like, no, this thing, you should be paying $100 or more for this album. It's so filled with just awesomeness. So that was my number 2.
It's very hard to disagree with that. And the fact that, I had to be very honest. So when that album came out, I was in England at the time studying abroad. It was right at the height of Britpop, or right when it was starting to escalate. The album came out, Lucky You was there. And then the Blur, Pulp, Oasis, they kind of had more of the spotlight. And this album kind of snuck underneath people's radar.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for me until Tim Burgess, Charlatans, did a listening party in 2020 and kind of revitalized the interest in this album. And it had been a while since I had listened to it. And I remember that listening party experience, the Tim Burgess listening party on Twitter. And it just put me right back. I'm like, oh my God, this is why it is from start to finish, top shelf to bottom.
Yeah.
It is an amazing album. And Feeling Lazy, and this is a total compliment, because one of my other favorite bands, the Boo Radleys, that song always reminded me of the Boo Radleys feel to it. So, and then Punch and Judy, I wrote here in my notes, almost the sped up version of The Price. So yeah. I'm not going to disagree with you. Okay, so that was your number 2, huh?
Uh-huh.
All righty. Well, my number 2. Again, this might shock people. See You in the Stars. Yes. Yes. Now, why? Why? What a remarkable return.
Yeah.
What just an accomplished. Again, I think it's got all the pieces of his experiences working together, coming together as a producer, as a songwriter, and just these songs move quickly. And by the time it's over, you're like, what the hell? That's over? That's all? No. I'm going to go back and hit play. And there are tracks on here that I think some of his best vocal work. Starts off with a great kind of foot stomper, Losing You. You talked about Emily Smiles. These big sweeping chorus on Great to Be Alive. And then one of my other favorite Lightning Seed song, Walk Another Mile, My Head is a Jungle. And it ends beautifully with See You in the Stars. And we've talked about the album covers. How do you not appreciate that? These album covers really speak to that feel within, right?
Yeah,
So
they really reflect what or the feeling of that album. You know.
yes, yes, and I don't know. I wasn't. I knew when I had this feeling this album was going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
After like the sixth or seventh listen, I'm like, oh Jesus,
Yeah.
how did he do it? Maybe that's the question we should be asking. How does he do it? So
Yes.
that's my number two.
Yeah.
Number one.
I think though that Seeing the Stars, it's a prime example of a guy who is an emotional vocalist.
Yeah.
Because when he's singing "Losing You," you're thinking like, wow. I mean, it's kind of like, you get that feeling sort of like right about here where you start feeling bad, and so he's able to express himself, and when it's joyful, he's able to express himself. It's really, really, really fantastic. So let's get to number one. It's got to be The First Experience, which is, but it's so hard because now I'm thinking maybe Jollification is number one, but I already talked about Jollification. But this album, All I Want, Pure, Joy. Like I said, Joy, I have the single version. I love the remix of that. Contains 2 non-album tracks. But also, this contains the song Love Explode, or my eyes, Love Explosion, which the 3 O'Clock had done previously. He had written it, and I think he produced that album. And it's just a joyful pop record, just from start to finish. And this was like, I couldn't believe, that this guy had been hiding his vocals behind, these other great vocalists. But then again, those, Paul Simpson was great in Care, and Steve Allen was great in Original Mirrors and stuff like that. But yeah, when he opened up his vocals and became the Lightning Seeds, it's just it's hard to deny just what a great artist he is, and has always been since the very beginning.
If you wouldn't mind telling us from that album, what is your favorite track?
Oh, it's always going to be Pure.
Yeah.
And I'm not okay. Here's, it's just like, how, you get married and, you love your wife and she's like the best thing for you, and you're married for 50 years until you both pass away, but you still have a soft spot for that first girl you kissed back in junior high school. And that's what Pure is. There may be songs on here that I love to death and I would love, but Pure was that first song. Pure was the first kiss for the Lightning Seeds. And that's why that is still going to be my favorite song, even though I'll admit he's probably done songs that are better. But there's a difference between my favorite and the greatest. And in this case, though, I think they both are Pure.
So my number one is sitting right there on that wall, and I'm going to go grab it.
Okay.
Yes, it is Jollification. This is the strawberry version, vinyl version. Supposedly, you open it and it's got the scent.
Yeah. Or it's got the sense.
Yes.
Lightning Seeds pun.
So I don't want to be so repetitive here, but to me, it is the perfect album.
Yeah.
When I listen to it time and time again, I'm just blown away by the engineering of it. The mixing sounds great. It just seems like all the stars were aligned here with all the artists you had mentioned: Ian McNabb, Alison Moyet, Terry Hall. If you want to dance, you dance. If you want to exercise to it, you want to exercise. If you want to write a poem, it has all these. It gives you the impetus to go live life.
Yeah.
And for a while, I loved the Strawberries. I never paid attention to the faces as the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh yeah, it's almost creepy.
No, it's just it's a work of art that it is a shame. I think you said it beautifully. It's a shame to see it in any kind of bargain bin,
Mm-hmm.
and it's my numero uno, and just it came with. I think you would like this, Steve. Before we close this conversation out, it came with a little slick of vinyl here. On the back side, so you have on the A side, you have this track, Lucifer,
Mm-hmm.
Sam, and then on the back, you have a beautiful acoustic version of Perfect.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and
wonder
I
if
was
those-
like, who would be selling this?
Wow.
I think you would appreciate that.
Yeah.
So you like the deep dives and deeper cuts.
Yeah.
Anything
Music
else you
geek.
want to share about the lightning seeds that we haven't touched on, or anything?
No,
like
just Ian Brody is just an inspirational and influential artist. You know, began just as a guitar player, you know, but, you know, Ian had mentioned, you know, the group Big in Japan. I did not mention Big in Japan because I've heard the legend of Big in Japan. I don't think that they actually ever recorded anything. And if they did, I've never heard it. If anything, a single. But then, you know, beginning with Original Mirrors, I've traveled that path and listened. I bought things because it was produced by Ian Brody. So when I bought the Icicle Works, If You Want to Defeat Your Enemy, it's like, oh my gosh, it's produced by Ian Brody. Amazing. You know, and then when I discovered that he was an artist himself with the Lightning Seeds, yeah, it's been a long journey, like what, 45 years or something.
It's amazing.
44 years.
Yeah, and never seen him live. I've never seen him live.
No, me neither.
So, in fact, whoever's watching this, and if you watch this later, actually, that's not true. They came to San Francisco, and I believe it was Slim's. And I want to say, was at that show. Oh my goodness! I don't have any memorabilia merch to prove it, so maybe I maybe have to go back to my ticket stubs. This has been amazing, Mr. Schnee. Thank you. And you know, one of the things I when I was doing all this research and homework about it, it's fun to sit here and really explore these albums and hear the differences and the nuances and the similarities, and kind of what pieces all this together. So thanks again for being a guest here on the very first surprise event. And then just remind the viewers again, anything you want to talk about with your work.
Well, check out my videos, subscribe to my channel on YouTube. It's, just look for Stephen Schnee. That's Stephen with a PHEN, or just type in CD Junkie Schnee and it'll pull you to it. I cover tons of stuff. I've covered the Lightning Seeds and, Ian McNabb. I've interviewed Ian McNabb for my Beach Blanket Fort Bingo show, and we're probably going to do one again. I'm probably going to do another sort of CD Junkie just devoted to his last 20 years of his career, just to bring that more into focus. But I've got stacks upon stacks of CDs over here of artists that I'll be covering and artists that we'll be interviewing. And it's a wonderful journey for just some guy who loves music so much and somehow has managed to find a way to share that love and good or bad, I'm out there, and you can catch me anytime you want, 24/7, by searching for my YouTube videos.
Thank you. Much appreciated. And by the way, if you like this event, feel free to comment anything you want to share about the Lightning Seeds and your experiences. We'd love to see them posted. Surprise event number 2 coming up July 1st. We're going to be focusing on the Beastie Boys. So that will be surprise event number 2. Thank you all. My name is W, okay, also known as William, host of the High Art on the Edge page. Thank you to Steve Schnee, and of course, thank you to Ian McNabb.
Thank you, Ian McNabb.
Ian Brody, Lightning Seeds. Big round of applause to you. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.